Going hand in hand with process modeling is its counterpart, process analysis. Process analysis leverages the process models that we have access to and that we create as business analysts in order to assess the present effectiveness of processes, find opportunities to improve upon those processes, analyze the impact of potential changes, and identify any gaps between what we've defined as our future state that we'd like to achieve and the present processes that exist today. Process analysis allows us to answer some key questions, such as how the process creates or improves the value that the organization offers. If we are doing a process and we can't clearly align it back to our strategic objectives and value drivers for the enterprise, then it's probably a process that we no longer should be conducting or that we need to change in order to better align with those standards. We should ask how well it's aligned not only to our organizational goals, but also to other processes. How clean is the handoff of information or product work or what have you from one process to another? If it's something that is a relatively fragile connection that oftentimes runs into issues or doesn't provide data or work product in exactly the format that the next process will need, thereby requiring some sort of manual massaging before moving forward, or otherwise causes some friction in our value chain, then it's something that we should seek to address. We should ask how critical the process is to the organization's strategic interests and what opportunities for improvement exist that can help us to better reach those broad strategic goals. And how might the process be impacted by change initiatives that are under consideration? This is true not only when we are discussing processes that would be directly part of a change, but also those processes that might be impacted by a change in which it is not directly involved. Understanding the linkages between various processes is important so that we can understand not only those directly impacted processes that might be under consideration, but also all of those other kinds of domino effects that otherwise might lead to negative, unforeseen consequences, or simply deprive us of the opportunity to leverage links between those processes to further improve upon our performance. Let's look back now on our flowchart from just a few moments ago, where we have a telephone claim agent helping to handle a claim related to a home insurance policy after a storm had rolled through a town where several of our customers happen to live. In this case, we see the full process flow as seen from the telephone claim agent's point of view, but we also have a dividing line here for a partition or swim lane that incorporates the on-site adjuster's processes as well. This is a good example of our ability to zoom in and out using process models depending on the audience that we're speaking with. In this case, we might be presenting this to the very same on-site adjusters that we now see added so that they understand what happens with the telephone claim agent before the claim is handed off to them. First, the on-site adjuster would confirm the appointment and then show up at the appointed time and place to examine the damages that have been alleged to occur. After taking photos of damages and collecting other sorts of documentary evidence, they can complete the claim report and file it back to the company. At this point, the on-site adjuster's job comes to an end, but the work for the company may still just be beginning. This claim may then be forwarded to a payments team that will then be responsible for making payment out to the claimant, or it may go to some sort of verification process for review before it eventually ends up in some sort of payment process. We can continue to expand or contract a model like this in order to encapsulate more of the organization's work based on whatever's most valuable for the scenario we're discussing. However, we can also use this sort of format to not just display an existing process, but to conduct some analysis upon it. We might in this case be eliciting information from stakeholders on both sides of this swim lane, both telephone claim agents and on-site adjusters, as well as our customers, in order to understand why we've seen a decline in customer satisfaction in recent years. When it comes to the telephone claim agent workflow, what we've heard from both those claim agents themselves, as well as from customers, is that oftentimes calls have to wait for too long and the claimants simply give up and decide to call back later. This doesn't, in fact, make anything better. The problem continues to compound as more and more claimants continue to call back, give up, call back later without actually clearing through the process in any sort of meaningful way. This is happening because we have a relatively limited number of agents on our phone system right now that might have been appropriate a few years ago. But based on departures from that team and increases in the number of policies that we are now in charge of, we no longer have the capacity necessary to serve our customer base. This is due largely to budget cuts that have impacted this area of the organization in pursuit of some higher target profit goals for the broader enterprise. This has led to the sort of negative reactions that we're seeing here today, and therefore is something we might wish to reassess and address in some sort of fashion, either making our system more interactive in nature such that people don't have to speak with a telephone claims agent at all, or bringing on the staff necessary to adequately handle these customer calls, especially if they come in bunches in certain times of day or following certain events, such as a large storm. In further speaking with our telephone claim agents, we find that when it comes to recording our accident details, this is an internal interface that only the telephone claim agent can see. This is problematic because not transmitting this information to the on-site adjuster means that this information is being gathered for essentially no reason. By gathering the information from the customer now, the on-site adjuster will still need to have the same questions answered by the customer at their appointment, potentially annoying the customer and also causing the on-site adjuster to spend more time on each case. This might be one of the reasons why it's increasingly difficult to find available times for adjusters to come out and meet with our customers. This is also exacerbated by the fact that we have a limited number of adjusters out there in the field, and this was caused originally by, you guessed it, the exact same budget cuts that had led to the decrease in our number of telephone claim adjusters in the first place. You can see by conducting this sort of root cause analysis that we'll discuss in even greater detail later in this course, we can begin to identify areas where the business can improve. Looking now at the on-site adjuster's point of view, it may be weeks after the initial incident has occurred before that adjuster is able to actually examine damages, which means they could have gotten worse in the meantime, or the homeowner might have given up and tried to make some repairs on their own, making it difficult to tell what damages might have been in place and might be covered underneath their policy. Again, a shortage of staff and not having enough trained adjusters in the field, due largely to the budget cuts mentioned above, might be one of our key problems here. However, it's not the only one. When it comes to completing the claim report itself, this is still a legacy paper report that must be filled out by hand and then submitted physically to the claim office for further processing. There's no ability to capture this sort of information on a mobile basis, thereby slowing down the process and eating up additional resources as we have to have our on-site adjusters make trips back and forth to headquarters rather than staying out in the field and submitting each claim on a remote basis. Oftentimes, these reports might be delayed by another day or two until they can make that trip back to the office to drop off the paperwork, therefore meaning our customers remain out of luck for an increasing period of time. This is because of those very same internal interfaces that have been mentioned above. There's a separation and a partition between our systems that needs to be resolved. A few key potential objectives become clear here. First, we need to reassess whether or not the budget cuts we initially implemented are something that we should keep in place, or if recommitting to customer service in this area is something that we need to consider. Further, even if we add more staff, we need to also make it a priority to make it easier for claim adjusters to file information and for information from the telephone claim adjuster to be shared with that claim adjuster on site. And make sure that that on-site adjuster is able to submit their findings as quickly as possible. We have a number of different objectives for our change initiative that we might seek to pursue now, and they're all thanks to the process modeling and process analysis that we've been able to complete at this point. Process analysis validates that a solution is aligned with the challenges that we actually see. If there were previously internal suggestions that perhaps we just need to make the customer website easier, for example, that would not seem to appear to be connected to the actual problems that we're facing at all. It might be worth assessing as something that could separately help to improve the customer experience, but the issues that we're facing have to do with our internal systems and shortage of staff. Process analysis may be applied to a wide variety of process models, as we can logic our way through them, understanding how work is completed and where either handoffs or the failure to hand off information or work in a smooth and integrated fashion could be leading to breakdowns in our overall processes. However, process analysis may require significant time commitments in order to yield valuable results. We see here that even with this relatively simple example, it takes some time to dig in and to understand how these roles interrelate. You can imagine how exponentially this effort might grow if it were involving not just two types of workers, but instead 8 or 10 or a dozen, over a more complex sort of process, over a longer period of time, with more integrations and interrelations with one another. All of these can make processes hard to model in the first place, much less to yield any benefit out of our analysis. As such, helping to figure out what the scope of each model should be, taking these things piecemeal in order to retain our ability to understand and focus on each piece can help us to surmount this challenge. Further, process analysis may not always be helpful when it comes to those processes that involve many manual decision points taking place, or those that rely heavily on organizational knowledge rather than specific processes that can be easily understood. In these cases, conducting something like rules analysis can help us to better understand how the work is being completed, because it has so much to do with decisions being made on the front lines by our human resources, rather than something that we can easily document as following a specific path.